Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
I'm Dustin Rea.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we're going to talk about real-life problems created by leaky abstractions or inconsistent abstractions. So last time Dustin was here, we were talking about problems that can be caused by things like how you store money, how you do your time zones, and how these are little inconsequential things, but they add up to a big maintenance nightmare, which makes them very expensive problems. And it seems very abstract. So today we're going to do quick short stories of how these real things have really bitten us as professional developers in the behinds for your amusement. So I'm going to kick off. This is one of my favorite screw-ups, where we had a system and parts of the system were doing time in seconds and parts of the system were doing time in milliseconds. And I encountered a function that said it was doing time in seconds, but it was really doing time. No, it was said it was doing time in milliseconds, but it was really doing time in seconds. And in a Boy Scout rule kind of way, without thinking about it, I wrote a test, verified that indeed the name of the function was wrong, and without thinking about it, changed it from seconds to milliseconds. So now everything was 1,000 more than it had been before, and committed my fix to this bug that I had just discovered. And lo and behold, a different part of the system suddenly started spending money 1,000 times faster because it was supposed to dole out money equally over the course of an hour. And the hour just got 1,000 times faster. The numbers got bigger. And I was working in ad tech at the time.
This is why you never fix things.
This is what talking about the Boy Scout rule and how this can bite you. Yeah. And so the change went out, and we started spending money like a drunken sailor, and we spent an extra. And what happened is we spent all of a client's money instead of an hour. We spent it in like 5 minutes. And then it shut off for that client for the hour, because then it was time for an hour. But it took a while to figure it out because, of course, I had added a test, and the name of the function was matched what the test was doing. And the real bug was the name of the function was wrong.
Yeah.
The function was correct, but it was named wrong. Because, again, this is a seconds versus milliseconds problem. And thus, we had to refund our customers about 20 or 30 grand because we spent their money incorrectly. But they weren't too unhappy because, again, it was advertising, so we just spent their money too quickly and not the way we promised. But still, the ads were purchased, customers came, so it wasn't a huge breaking of trust. But it was a case where I had seconds versus milliseconds, and boom, wrecked things.
Yeah. In those cases, I don't even think I would change the name of the function. I think I would just leave a comment. This function does not what it's supposed to do. It's named incorrectly. Because even if all the references were changed, or if it was a private function and nothing else was calling it, I'm like, I'm not touching this. I learned, it's just too dangerous to touch things.
Yes, certainly the correct fix, if I did need to fix it, would have been to change the name of the function and not to change the functionality of the function.
You're just trying to be too good of a developer.
Yes.
Be a little worse. Just a little bit worse. I was trying to think of a story too. I don't have one off the top of my head. The first thing I thought was the pennies to dollars thing that a lot of people have to wrap their head around. Like, you don't, like, I guess as an engineer, when you first get into computer science, like, you would think you would store money as like a float just because it makes sense at first and not pennies. I fortunately have not ran into a terrible situation where I've, like, refunded somebody 10 times the amount they were owed or something like that, or 100 times the amount they were owed. from that, but I have seen a lot of really sketchy code that is like casting a string $10.32, like 10.32 as a string, to a different type, and then multiplying it by 100 to get the penny amount, and all this kind of stuff, instead of using like a library or whatever for it.
Yeah, I've seen a
I
lot
assume
of.
there'll be a bug, but I'm like, yeah, so far I haven't seen a catastrophe quite yet, but I'm like nervous around
I
stuff
have
like
seen
that.
a lot of. Here's the money, cast it to a float, multiply it by 100, cast it to an int, and
Hmm.
then at the end divide it by 100. I have seen that.
Occasionally, I've seen like a stored in the database. I'll see something like 10.99996 or something, like something goofed up on the conversion back, and there's like this really long
Yeah.
thing that's like
Yeah.
less than a penny off. Eventually that adds up, but so far I haven't seen any terrible bugs.
So one nasty bug that I hit, and this is decades ago, plural. I worked for a company. It was a U.S. company. We were using Microsoft SQL Server, which at the time, and maybe today, was case insensitive. So uppers and lowers were the same. And we got acquired by a company that was doing international trading, and they were using Oracle as their database. And Oracle is case sensitive, as any rational database would be case sensitive. And one of the things that happened was, okay, now we had different currencies, and there was pounds, and there was some things traded in pounds in Britain, and some things traded in pence, which is the decimal of pounds. Pounds is capital P, pence is lowercase p.
Hmm.
And on one side, we had a database that was case sensitive, and on the other side, we had a database that was not case sensitive. And that caused a convert. So even though we were doing money correctly, the monies were different, and our one system was blind to that fact. And that caused a whole host of problems of off by 100, off by a factor of 100,
Mm-hmm.
because we couldn't tell the difference between pounds and pence, because one, our database wasn't case sensitive. And this is the kind of thing that we're talking about, where it's a subtle bug, it's a difference, and it became about because the company got acquired.
Hmm.
And literally in those queries, I had to do ASCII char and go by the ASCII bytecode instead of the letter.
Yeah.
Why did you have to switch? I mean, I know that the company was acquired, but was that the only reason that they were trying to move to a different database?
We weren't trying to move to a database at all. We were trying not to move to a database. But the problem is when we imported data from one system to the other,
Mm-hmm.
we lost the ability to tell the difference between pounds and pence.
Why import from one system to the other? This is
Long
decades
reasons,
ago.
decades ago, and
That's
I
right.
believe I believe that the larger answer was money, like the cost
Okay.
of they didn't want to run two systems,
Fair
and
enough.
if and again complicated. There was a whole lot of things going on, so
Hmm.
we got bought by a company that was owned by Reuters, and Reuters had a site license for Oracle, but Reuters was spinning out to the company Instinet. And so Instinet was losing its site license for Oracle. And so they wanted to get rid of all the Oracle because Oracle's expensive. And because they weren't paying per instance, because Reuters had a site license, they had just gone, instances
Hmm.
everywhere, because each one was free. This is back when you had installed servers and all of these things. And so get off Oracle because this huge bill is coming was the
Got it.
name
Okay.
was I think the underlying problem why we were like, oh well, we've got SQL Server and it's got capacity. Let's move over.
And cause bugs by accident.
It caused bugs
Bummer.
because one is case sensitive and one is not.
Dustin, you got any interesting stories that you've run into over the years that's somewhat related to
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. I think the first case that really alerted me to this problem is I think probably the best story of it, because I was as a young engineer blindsided by it, so to say, um, and it was extremely painful. So this was back in early in my like freelancing career,
Mm-hmm.
before I was even running the agency yet. But I was freelance building a SaaS for a guy that was doing like spa software. So think of like if you were go to like book an appointment like for a nail salon, or like if you've seen like those kind of like health resort type places where it's like, you can do float tanks, or the cryo tanks, or like these different kind of new age
Mm-hmm.
like healing
Hmm.
things. So it was built for these kinds of businesses, because there was no software at that time that was specifically built for them. There was like other software in the market that was, much wider audience. Like maybe they tailored to like including like barbershops and like all these other kinds of similar appointment setting places, but not the exact type of flow that these places have. Because it's kind of like they have, instead of it being people based, it's like they have these rooms, right? So it's like the room has a schedule to it, and this all comes is coming to a point onto why this was such an issue. But these places have different like rooms or different tanks, or like maybe they have cryo 1, cryo 2, cryo 3, and all of these different like service rooms have different like times, that like different intervals that they can be booked. Um, so this was like a very date time and time zone heavy application. The issue that happened is kind of twofold. I don't think at the very first iteration, I don't think we had any standardized like how we were storing the date times. Like I want to say we were probably just using like UTC in the back end, but I think we might have even been using date strings at that time. Um, so what would happen is we were pretty much at the launch of the software. Like, we've spent all this time on it, and we're launching to like the beta clients, right? I think there was like maybe a dozen of them. These are people with like real shops that they're trying to run from this software,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like at different places all over the U.S. that the my client had like reached out to and like made friends with through like trade shows and stuff like that. So they were willing to try out this software, in order to get like a lifetime license or whatever to kind of deal with. We knew there were going to be some bugs and some issues. We didn't
Right.
know, though, we were going to wreck their entire scheduling system for like 2 straight weeks before we got it figured out. So that was kind of the
Oof.
the real life consequence of it. And like again, I was a freelancer, like working on this by myself, and I have my clients obviously very upset. And then we had like a dozen or so shops that like had their well, one of them, if they were, I can't remember what time zone it was, but one time zone was perfectly fine. But the other time zones were having like mismatched um, um, dates to the services. The other interesting problem that came up that really kind of put a bow on everything was, even once we got we kind of, the solution to that was to come up with the organization time zone. So instead of trying to use like our time zone or a universal time zone for the entire software, we would set the time zone for the location. And some people had multi locations too. So instead of it being account based, it was based on the location that you were coming to. The other thing that tripped us up was the user's time zone may not match the time zone that they're booking in. So getting the time out of the database and then displaying it on the calendar for the person to book, we're thinking for the sake of testing purposes, when we were doing the testing, we want to see the time as it is from the location. So we make sure that the time math is all like correct and we're seeing the correct time zones. However, from a UX perspective, if you are the user trying to book software and it's showing their time zone instead of your time zone, you are now showing up at the wrong hour for your appointment. So like this happened. We had one location that was on the border of two states, and so they had different time
Ah.
zones. And he was like, "Yeah, this is actually like pretty common. Like, you just think about it. There's a ton of border cities all over the country. So like everywhere that there's a city like that, we're gonna have an issue.
Right, like
So it's like,
Chicago and
yeah,
Indiana.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, there's like several these like border cases where they border different time zones. So yeah, that was
So that's an interesting
several
case.
stacked issues.
What, in that case, from a UX perspective, how do you make it clear to the customer whether they're booking the time in the location's
Yeah,
time zone or their time zone
So we did the if you've ever seen a Google Calendar has, you can show like two different time zones on the side where you want to like book your time. We essentially just stole that design, but we used one side as the location's time zone and one side is your time zone, and we only showed the two if your user's time zone was different than the
Ah,
time zone that the place
That
had.
makes sense.
So that's how we got it work. So then the other kind of complicated thing about it is we didn't have like, it was a custom calendar, like the way it
Mm-hmm.
was lined out, because it was like you could book different services, different locations. So we would put the box, like we had to position these boxes on the right location in the calendar based on, the right time. So it lines up with the timelines that are actually in the background of the UI. So that was kind of an interesting, UI to time calculation problem that had to be solved, and it took a lot of like dialing to get that right. And there's all these different constraints that went along with it, like with different intervals, like how long between the booking sessions that they could have. So it's like there's all this variability, and then how do you sync that across multiple customers who may be trying to buy the same services at the same time. So there's kind of different things there too. But yeah, the main thing on the consistency was the dates and the times and getting the time zones right. And that's kind of like what has made me such a stickler for this in every team that I
Mm-hmm.
go to
yeah,
from then on
trial
out.
by fire.
Right.
How did
Yeah.
you?
Once bitten,
How did
twice
you?
shy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How did you handle the stress of being the only person working on this with people mad at you?
That's a good question. Phew, I don't know. I guess it's just
I've
maybe,
blacked out that part of my life.
yeah. I mean,
I'll-
like I guess it's an integrity thing, right? Like in the agency world, I'd never heard this term before, but my agency mentor, Kurt Schmidt, look him up if he wants to. He's a great guy. Kind of taught me this idea of the death march, right? And it's a kind of a dark joke about agency life sometimes, where like sometimes you may overcommit. Like that is a reality of agency projects,
Death
because
marches
sometimes
are
it's
not
hard.
agency specific, though.
Sure, right. But in this, this was,
Yeah.
I'm a young freelancer trying to figure it out, right? So
Mm.
I'm thinking, yeah, I can build this whole app, no problem. And I did it, and we, was, made decent time and stuff. But there were so many like issues baked in once we started to
Mm,
launch. That was kind of the issue. But high integrity, I think, is the core of it. Also, I really believed in the product. Like, we were really solving problems that there was like I mentioned, there was this bigger software company. Their software was very, very generic and clunky, and it
mm,
just didn't like. It's like you're always forcing it to try to work with these businesses. Where like using our software, it like seeing users use it through. We used Full Story to watch the UX, and it was like they just knew what to do. Like it just made
Nice.
sense to them on how they thought about it, and that also speaks to the belief I have about like non-technical founders starting software businesses. This was a non-technical founder that knew that business very
Mm-hmm.
well, and so he saw the gap himself and like had the connections. So it's very um, easy if the go-to-market side is like solved, whereas
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like you have this buggy software and you're just going back and forth, but you're not even sure if it's valuable to anyone. I think that's a much harder situation to like push through for both the developer and the founder, because the belief isn't there yet. Like the evidence
Right.
of the belief isn't there yet. But in this case, we had early users and they were using it. They were willing to pay. So that it was just a mission. We really had to get it out, and we got through it. So that was good.
So I have some follow up questions now because I'm curious because we just did an episode about this. So looking back, right, you started off with a dozen customers. All your initial launch was a dozen customers all across the country. Looking back, would you have tried to push for like launch with a single customer? That wouldn't have exposed the time zone issues, but would
Yeah,
it have made things
yeah. I
better?
mean, we did do some like really initial launches with I think one or two early people, and we
Mm.
ironed everything out. I want to say that was maybe that one was in the same time zone because it was like
mm.
someone local. Like I don't quite remember. It's been several years since I did this project.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think we did have like a one or two beta users, and then we were using the software, like trying to dog food it and try to like understand it from the user's perspective. But of course, in testing, when everything is perfectly lined up for you to test, you kind of get in these patterns of testing things that are going to work, and users
Mm.
find new paths, that you didn't expect.
Right.
So yes and no, like I think at some point you have to kind of, that's why I like to normalize these stories is there's going to be extreme discomfort in these like software launches and stuff. And to me, I think that's, if you know that's normal, then you can kind of brace yourself and be prepared to handle it both mentally, emotionally, and with your family. Even like there's a lot of things people don't talk about, right? Like how do you explain to your wife, hey, I need to work for 2 straight work weeks for free in order to make up for this mistake, right? Like so there's things like that, and we've built that over the years, right? Like my family definitely understands now, because this is like what we do. But yeah, I think all of that really plays into it, right? Like when you're partnering up with these businesses, you want them, you kind of have a symbiotic relationship. Like if they don't succeed, what happens to you, right? Hope
Cool.
that answers your question.
Yeah. The second question, I was just curious: is this company still around? Did they have a good exit, or?
No, this company is not around now. They went under for totally different reasons. There is another whole story in there that I would love to tell someday. But the crux is essentially perfectionism. You can't let perfectionism get in the way of
Yeah.
expansion, and
Yeah.
that's why I had the shaky answer to would I have gone out slower. Like I know we would have been dead faster if we would have done that because we were running out. Like the capital was running out. This was a bootstrap company, and they had kind of a set amount that they wanted to be able to invest and test the theory. And I think they tested the theory, and the theory was right. But when they realized what it takes to operate a business like that, they hadn't like planned for that. So the revenue model like wasn't there. They didn't have the engine to kind of like keep going at that point, even though they had like a small, beta group that was, somewhat successful, but just the reality of operating the business past that point. Like I said, I'd love to do a whole talk on this. I think there's a fallacy on just even, like when you launch your software, that doesn't mean you're done investing in it. It is going to be a constant operation at that point. Once it's live, it's not like that's the end of the spend for the product.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put that down on the list because I want to talk about this more someday, but not today.
Yeah.
Intuitive product. People loved it. Full Story said so, but not a reasonable business model.
Ever. Right. Yeah. Yep. I'm sure there's a business model in there. It was just maybe a second run through or whatever.
All right. I think we've gotten lots of great examples here. Anybody else before we cut it off? Awesome. Well, thank you all for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
Dustin Rea.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.